The chandeliers sparkled above the grand ballroom, casting a golden glow over rows of glittering gowns and sharp tuxedos. Waiters glided between tables with silver trays of champagne, while cameras flashed like restless fireflies. It was the annual Horizon Tech Gala, the most prestigious event in New York's corporate calendar. Business moguls, socialites, and reporters had gathered in one place to celebrate the empire that CEO Adrian Carter claimed as his triumph. But tonight would be remembered not for the speeches or the deals. It would be remembered for the betrayal that unfolded under the merciless glare of the spotlight. The crowd hushed as Adrian, tall and polished in his midnight black tuxedo, stepped onto the stage. His jawline was sharp, his confidence unshaken, and his hand rested on the waist of a woman who was not his wife. Gasps rippled across the ballroom. A dozen phones rose instantly, capturing the image. Adrian Carter, once admired as a loyal family man, proudly introducing a stunning brunette in a shimmering silver gown. Her name was Selena Moore, a model whose face had graced magazine covers and billboards, and more importantly, she was known as Isabella Carter's best friend. "Ladies and gentlemen," Adrian's voice boomed through the microphone, smooth as velvet and cold as steel. "Allow me to present someone very special. She has inspired me, supported me, and will be by my side as I lead Horizon Tech into its next era. Please welcome Selena Moore." A collective murmur surged through the audience. Selena flashed a victorious smile, slipping her arm tighter around Adrian's. Her glittering eyes scanned the room as if daring anyone to question her place. The betrayal was not hidden, it was showcased. A cruel declaration that the man had traded his pregnant wife for her closest confidant. Reporters whispered furiously. Cameras zoomed in. Investors exchanged uneasy looks. Even the orchestra faltered for a moment before continuing the soft strains of Mozart. This was no ordinary scandal. It was theater, performed under crystal chandeliers and carved into headlines before Isabella had even taken her next breath. And then, just as the room was adjusting to the shock, the heavy oak doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. A sudden draft carried across the floor, pulling at gowns and scattering the scent of tulips from the imported arrangements. Every head turned, and there she was, Isabella Carter. She stood in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the flood of light from the hotel's marble corridor. Her long, dark hair cascaded over her shoulders, and the silk of her gown hugged the curve of her belly, 6 months pregnant, unmistakably glowing, yet her face was pale with anguish. One hand rested protectively on her unborn child, the other clenched around her clutch bag. For a moment, silence swallowed the gala. The music stopped, the whispers froze. The only sound was the frantic click-click-click of cameras capturing the moment. Adrian's smile faltered. His grip on Selena tightened, but his eyes betrayed the panic he tried to hide. He had expected Isabella to stay home, broken, invisible. He had underestimated her courage to show up, to face the world that had just witnessed her betrayal. Selena's expression shifted too, from smug triumph to a flicker of unease. She had wanted Isabella erased, not present, not radiant in her quiet dignity. Isabella's steps echoed across the polished marble floor as she entered the ballroom. Each step was steady, though her heart pounded violently in her chest. She could feel hundreds of eyes piercing through her, weighing her with curiosity, pity, and judgment. She had once walked this room as a respected wife, the woman beside the CEO. Tonight, she was the abandoned woman, humiliated before the world. Yet her chin was lifted. She refused to crumble. Not here, not in front of them. The whispers grew louder. "Is that his wife? She's pregnant, my God. And that's her best friend with him? Unbelievable." Isabella reached the edge of the stage. Adrian cleared his throat, his mask of control slipping. "Isabella, this isn't the time." But Isabella's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Not the time? You introduce my best friend as your new partner while I'm carrying your child, and you dare say it's not the time?" Gasps erupted. Some guests averted their eyes, others leaned in, hungry for the unfolding scandal. A photographer's flash bathed Isabella's tear-streaked face in harsh white light, immortalizing her heartbreak. Selena smirked, her hand sliding up Adrian's arm. "Darling, let's not make a scene," she purred, her tone dripping with false sympathy. But her eyes burned with the thrill of victory, as though Isabella's pain was her crown. Isabella trembled, but she did not back down. You betrayed not just me, Adrian, but our child. You betrayed the vows you made before God, before everyone in this room." The silence that followed was deafening. No one dared to clap, no one dared to move. Adrian's empire, built on power and reputation, was cracking under the weight of his own arrogance. And yet, as Isabella stood there trembling with fury and grief, she knew this was only the beginning. Her humiliation was complete. The headlines would scream it tomorrow: CEO discards pregnant wife for best friend. She would be pitied, mocked, and cast aside. That night, she left the gala with her dignity shredded, her heart broken, and her future uncertain. But what no one in that ballroom knew, what Adrian and Selina had never imagined, was that Isabella Carter was not the weak, discarded wife they believed her to be. She carried not just a child, but the bloodline of an empire. Hidden in legal vaults and trusts, a fortune of $5 billion awaited her name. And when the time came, she would return, not as the humiliated wife, not as the abandoned friend, but as the heir. The gala thought it had witnessed the peak of scandal. In truth, it had only seen the opening act of a reckoning that would shake the very foundations of Horizon Tech. And Adrian Carter had no idea that the woman he discarded would soon hold the power to destroy him. Long before the glittering chandeliers and ruthless headlines, Isabella Carter had lived a life that was deceptively ordinary. To the outside world, she was simply a young woman with gentle eyes and a soft smile. The kind of woman who blended quietly into the rhythm of everyday life. But beneath that gentle exterior lay a story of sacrifice, love, and secrets that no one at the gala could have imagined. Isabella was born in Boston, the only child of a woman who valued privacy above prestige. Her father, Richard Carter, had been one of America's most influential businessmen, a titan who built corporations with the same ease others built houses. But his relentless pursuit of power had fractured the family. Her mother, Eleanor, insisted on raising Isabella far from boardrooms and flashing cameras. She wanted her daughter to know friendship, laughter, and the simplicity of life, not just the weight of dynasties and billion-dollar fortunes. Eleanor's choice shaped Isabella's childhood. Instead of growing up in mansions with butlers, Isabella lived in a modest townhouse. She went to a neighborhood school, joined after-school art classes, and rode her bike down leafy streets like any other child. Her friends never guessed that she was heiress to a vast, carefully hidden fortune. Only a handful of lawyers and her late mother's confidants knew the truth. One day, Isabella would inherit not just money, but controlling shares in a $5 billion empire. But that day felt distant, almost unreal, to the girl who loved sketching interior spaces in her notebooks. Isabella dreamed not of stock markets or mergers, but of designing homes filled with warmth. She studied architecture and interior design, excelling with both creativity and discipline. She wanted to build beauty, not power. At 21, while studying abroad in Florence, Isabella first met Selina Moore. Selina was bold, magnetic, and stunning, the kind of woman who drew stares wherever she went. They became fast friends, balancing each other like fire and water. Isabella admired Selina's confidence, while Selina leaned on Isabella's quiet loyalty. Isabella never suspected that the same woman who toasted her birthdays and shared secrets late at night would one day steal her husband. Life shifted again when Isabella's mother passed away unexpectedly. Grief hollowed her heart, and for a time she withdrew into herself. It was during this fragile season that she met Adrian Carter. Adrian was everything a grieving young woman might cling to: charming, ambitious, attentive. He wasn't part of her father's empire. He worked his way up in the competitive tech world. When they met at a charity fundraiser, he swept her into a whirlwind romance. For Isabella, it felt like destiny. Here was a man who, she believed, loved her not for her name, not for her fortune, because he didn't even know it existed, but for her heart. Within a year, they married in an intimate ceremony at a vineyard in Napa Valley. Isabella looked radiant in her lace gown, Adrian whispering promises of forever into her ear. Guests said they had never seen a happier bride. Isabella's friends marveled at her luck, a man so devoted, a love so pure. But what they didn't see was the sacrifice Isabella made. She left her blossoming career in design to support Adrian's rise. She traded her own ambitions for his, believing in his dream of building Horizon Tech into a global powerhouse. She became the perfect wife, hosting dinners, attending events, smoothing his path at every turn. And when whispers of his late nights and long business meetings surfaced, she silenced her doubts. Love, she told herself, required trust. Then came the moment that should have been their greatest joy. Isabella discovered she was pregnant. Tears of happiness filled her eyes when the doctor confirmed the news. Adrian hugged her tightly, promising he would be the best father. For a few fleeting weeks, Isabella believed their marriage had found new purpose. She decorated the nursery herself, carefully choosing soft blues and creams. She read books on motherhood late into the night, her hand resting protectively on her belly. But the cracks widened. Adrian grew distant, his ambition turning colder, sharper. He began to criticize Isabella for not doing enough. He urged her to look more polished, to speak less at events, to behave as though she were merely a decorative accessory. Isabella endured the words in silence, clinging to the belief that love could overcome pride. Selena reappeared around that time, freshly returned from modeling contracts abroad. She offered comfort, telling Isabella she was beautiful, telling her she deserved joy. Isabella welcomed her friend back into her life with open arms, never imagining betrayal hiding behind those warm embraces. Slowly, Adrian's true nature surfaced. He wasn't just ambitious, he was ruthless. He started seeing Isabella not as a partner, but as a burden. Every time she spoke about her pregnancy, he dismissed her. Every time she expressed her fears, he rolled his eyes. He wanted freedom, power, and glamour, not the quiet devotion of a wife who had given him everything. Isabella noticed the signs, the way Adrian looked at Selena, the way Selena lingered a little too long at their house. But denial is a powerful force. She told herself it was nothing, that she was paranoid, that pregnancy hormones made her imagine shadows. And then came the night of the gala. The night her world crumbled under chandeliers and cameras. But what no one saw, not Adrian, not Selena, not even Isabella herself in that moment, was the ember still burning inside her. The ember of the girl who once dreamed of building beauty, the daughter of Eleanor, the rightful heir to Richard Carter's empire. Isabella had spent years dimming her own light to let others shine. Now, standing at the edge of ruin, she would soon discover that the legacy she had buried was the weapon she needed to rise. For Isabella, betrayal wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a rebirth. And the world was about to learn that the quietest woman in the room could roar the loudest when pushed to the edge. The world of Horizon Tech was built on glass towers and golden illusions. From the outside, it looked flawless. Sleek boardrooms with polished mahogany tables, sprawling penthouses overlooking Central Park, and glittering galas where champagne flowed like water. For years, this was the setting of Isabella Carter's life. She moved through it with grace, her presence delicate yet dignified, as though she belonged to this rarefied air. But behind the shine, cracks were spreading. Cracks that would one day swallow everything she thought she knew. Their home was a penthouse carved out of the Manhattan skyline itself, 40 floors above the restless city. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across the living room, offering sweeping views of glittering bridges and endless streams of headlights. The furniture was curated by world-class designers, the art chosen from exclusive galleries. Yet, for Isabella, it always felt more like a showroom than a sanctuary. Adrian loved it that way. Every object a symbol of his success, every corner a testament to his rise. For him, the penthouse was not a home but a trophy case. Isabella tried to soften it. She filled the rooms with fresh flowers, framed photos of their early days together, and small trinkets that carried meaning only to her. On the nursery door she taped a sonogram picture of their unborn child, whispering promises of safety and love. But Adrian rarely noticed those touches. To him, the baby was an inconvenience, a distraction from the empire he was building. The business world worshipped Adrian. In boardrooms, he commanded silence with a single glance. Investors lined up for a chance to hear him speak, hanging on every projection and chart. Horizon Tech was more than a company. It was his kingdom. And Isabella, whether she liked it or not, was part of the facade. She attended gala after gala, slipping into designer gowns that Adrian selected. He would nod approvingly at her appearance, like a man admiring a polished accessory, then lead her into a room full of power brokers. She smiled when he needed her to smile, shook hands with people who never looked her in the eye, and laughed at jokes that weren't funny. She knew her role, to make him appear stable, grounded, respectable. But she also saw the truth. In hushed conversations over champagne, wives whispered about mistresses. In shadowed corners, deals were struck that sacrificed loyalty for profit. She noticed how Adrian's gaze lingered on younger women, how he leaned too close during business dinners. The world of high society was not about love or trust. It was about image, about pretending. The Horizon Tech Gala was the crown jewel of that image. Each year, the company spared no expense to host the city's elite at venues dripping with luxury. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, polished mirrors, orchestras playing beneath domed ceilings. It was a performance of wealth, a theater of power. For Adrian, the gala was not just an event, it was a coronation, a chance to parade his empire before cameras and competitors. Isabella once believed in its magic. In the first years of their marriage, she had entered those ballrooms at his side, glowing with pride. She thought they were a team, thought the applause belonged to both of them. She remembered the first gala after their wedding, how Adrian kissed her hand in front of the cameras, whispering that she was his good luck charm. The flashbulbs had captured them in a perfect embrace, splashed across magazines as the couple to admire. But as years passed, the magic soured. Adrian stopped looking at her with affection and started looking at her like a liability. He became sharper, colder, driven not by love but by hunger for more power, more recognition. Isabella's role shrank to silence, her voice drowned out by the noise of ambition. Still, she clung to hope. She decorated the nursery with care, ordered baby clothes, and prayed that fatherhood might soften him. She imagined a quieter life after the child's birth, a chance for them to rediscover the love they had lost. But every time she brought up her dreams, Adrian dismissed her with a wave of his hand. "It's not the time, Isabella," he would say, eyes glued to his phone. "We have shareholders to impress. Focus on looking perfect for the gala." So she did. She put on the gowns, wore the jewels, and smiled through the ache in her chest. She hid her loneliness behind flawless makeup and radiant poses. The world saw a woman who had it all: a wealthy husband, a luxury home, a child on the way. No one saw the nights she cried in the nursery, whispering lullabies to a baby who had not yet been born. And then came Selena, the old friend who returned like a storm. Selena fit effortlessly into the high society world, dazzling photographers with her beauty. Adrian introduced her at first as a close family friend, and Isabella, blinded by loyalty, welcomed her with open arms. She never noticed the glances between them, the late-night calls, the growing intimacy. She never suspected that the same world she had trusted to hold her marriage together was preparing to tear it apart. By the time the Horizon Tech Gala arrived that year, the setting had transformed from a stage of celebration into a battlefield. The chandeliers still sparkled, the champagne still flowed, but for Isabella, the air was heavy with betrayal. Every corner of that ballroom whispered lies she hadn't yet uncovered. Every camera that flashed was a predator waiting to devour her heartbreak. And under those chandeliers, her life would unravel in front of the world. Because the world of high society, with its glittering masks and endless performances, had no mercy for a woman who showed weakness. It demanded perfection, even as it prepared to feast on scandal. That was the stage Isabella walked into, one last time as a wife, and unknowingly, for the first time, as the woman who would one day reclaim it all. For in the world of wealth and betrayal, the most fragile setting can hide the most powerful comeback. To understand the betrayal that shattered Isabella's world, one must look closely at the two people who engineered it: Adrian Carter, her husband, and Selena Moore, the woman she once called her best friend. Together, they were the embodiment of greed and vanity, two people who believed power and beauty could excuse treachery. Their fall would one day be spectacular, but first they rose high on a mountain of lies. Adrian Carter had not been born into privilege. His childhood was a mixture of scarcity and determination, raised in a modest home by parents who worked long hours but never had enough. From the start, Adrian vowed he would never live small, never settle for mediocrity. He studied relentlessly, chasing scholarships and internships, building a reputation as a man who could outwork and outmaneuver anyone. By his early 30s, Adrian was celebrated as a visionary in the tech world. Horizon Tech, the company he had clawed into existence, grew rapidly. His name began appearing in magazines, his speeches quoted in business circles. But with success came something darker: arrogance. Adrian stopped seeing people as humans and started seeing them as stepping stones. If someone couldn't advance his empire, they were expendable. Even his marriage, once rooted in tenderness, began to morph into something transactional. At first, he adored Isabella. He loved the way she listened, the way she believed in him, the way she lit up every room with her quiet grace. But as his ambitions swelled, so did his contempt. He saw her sacrifices not as gifts, but as weaknesses. "Don't waste time on decorating nurseries," he sneered one evening, scrolling through his emails. "Focus on how you look for the investors. That's your job now." Isabella had swallowed the sting, but deep inside, she knew love was crumbling into control. If Adrian embodied ruthless ambition, Selena Moore represented vanity cloaked in charm. She had always been stunning, even in their college days in Florence, where Isabella first befriended her. Selena thrived on attention. She was the woman who turned heads when she entered a room, who loved the weight of eyes on her like a crown. But beauty alone was not enough for her. She wanted wealth, influence, and a place among the elite. Her modeling career had given her visibility, but not stability. Beneath the glamorous photo shoots and glossy magazine covers was a woman desperate for a permanent ticket to luxury. When Selena re-entered Isabella's life, she played the part of the supportive friend flawlessly. She complimented Isabella's pregnancy glow, brought her tea during morning sickness, and listened to her worries late at night. To Isabella, Selena was a sister, someone who had shared secrets, laughter, and tears. But to Selena, Isabella was an opportunity. She envied Isabella's position, the penthouse, the jewels, the security of being the CEO's wife. And when she saw Adrian's restless eyes, she recognized a hunger that matched her own. Slowly, deliberately, she positioned herself closer to him. She laughed at his jokes, praised his brilliance, and touched his arm just long enough to linger. Adrian noticed. At first, it was casual, a late-night text, a private lunch under the guise of catching up. Then came hotel rooms, whispered conversations, and stolen kisses. Their affair bloomed in secrecy, feeding on the thrill of betrayal. Adrian was intoxicated by Selena's boldness, the way she flattered his ego. Selena was addicted to the promise of wealth, the glittering life she thought she deserved. Together, they crafted a cruel narrative. Adrian convinced himself that Isabella was holding him back, that her quiet loyalty was a chain keeping him from greater glory. He told himself he needed someone like Selena, glamorous, daring, willing to play the part of his queen in the empire he envisioned. Selena, meanwhile, whispered poison into his ear. "She doesn't understand you, Adrian," she cooed. "She's soft, too ordinary for a man like you. You deserve someone who can match your ambition. Someone like me." And Adrian believed her. What made their betrayal so venomous was not just the affair, but the audacity to flaunt it. Most people who cheated hid in the shadows, not Adrian and Selena. They wanted the world to see, to gasp, to envy. The Horizon Tech Gala became their stage, their twisted coronation. "Are you sure about this?" Selena asked in the limousine that night, her lips painted a daring crimson. "Positive," Adrian replied, his tone dripping with arrogance. "This is my empire, my narrative. Isabella will fade into the background, and you will stand beside me. No one will dare question it." He underestimated the power of humiliation, the very traits that made Adrian and Selena drawn to each other. His arrogance and her vanity were the same ones that blinded them. They thought the world would admire their boldness. They thought Isabella would vanish quietly. They thought betrayal could be repackaged as destiny. But the world does not always reward cruelty. And Isabella, though broken in that moment, was not defeated. What Adrian and Selena didn't know was that their arrogance was setting the stage for their downfall. Adrian believed he was discarding a powerless wife. Selena believed she was replacing her best friend as queen of an empire. In truth, both were stepping into a trap of their own making. Because Isabella's story was far from over. And when the day came for her to rise, Adrian would face the collapse of everything he built, and Selena would learn that beauty without loyalty is nothing more than glass, glittering on the outside, but shattering at the slightest touch. For now, though, in that cruel chapter of Isabella's life, they stood as the villains. One a husband who traded love for power, the other a friend who traded loyalty for luxury. Together they believed they had won, but the game was only beginning. And the empire they thought was theirs was destined to belong to the woman they betrayed. The Horizon Tech Gala had always been a spectacle of wealth, a place where fortunes were displayed like jewels and reputations were sealed with handshakes. But that night, it became a stage for one of the cruelest betrayals ever seen in New York's high society. The chandeliers glimmered overhead as cameras flashed from every corner. Journalists scribbled in their notebooks, and photographers jostled for the perfect shot. Everyone waited for Adrian Carter's keynote speech, the annual address where he outlined Horizon Tech's future. But no one expected what he would announce instead. Adrian strode onto the stage with his usual confidence, but this time his hand was wrapped tightly around Selena Moore's. The audience stirred with murmurs, confusion spreading like wildfire. A ripple of disbelief moved through the ballroom. Whispers turned into gasps as people realized what was happening. The CEO was not just bringing a guest to his side. He was replacing his wife. "Ladies and gentlemen," Adrian began, his voice smooth, his smile sharp. "Tonight is about more than numbers and projections. It is about the future of Horizon Tech and of my personal life. I am honored to introduce the woman who will stand by me in this journey, the woman who inspires me every day. Please welcome Selena Moore." The ballroom erupted in stunned silence. Reporters scrambled, pens scratching, cameras firing nonstop. Adrian had not just ended his marriage, he had staged a public execution of Isabella's dignity. Selena stepped forward, her gown shimmering under the lights. She waved delicately to the audience, as though she had earned this place. Her lips curved in a smile, but her eyes glittered with triumph. She leaned into Adrian, pressing a kiss to his cheek, and the cameras caught it in 1,000 flashes. The betrayal was complete. And then, as if the cruelty wasn't sharp enough, Adrian delivered the final blow. "As many of you know," he continued, his voice booming, "my marriage has come to an end. Isabella and I have chosen separate paths, and I wish her well. But tonight, I move forward, with Selena by my side. Together we will lead Horizon Tech into a new era." Gasps turned into low, horrified murmurs. It wasn't just the affair that shocked the audience, it was the audacity, the deliberate humiliation. Adrian had not only betrayed his pregnant wife, he had erased her in front of the very world that once applauded their love story. And then the doors opened. The sound echoed across marble floors as Isabella entered. Her hand rested protectively over her pregnant belly, her face pale but defiant. Every head turned, every camera swiveled. For a heartbeat, time froze. Adrian's smile faltered. Selena's grip on his arm tightened. Isabella's eyes locked onto them, shining with tears but burning with rage. She walked toward the stage, her heels clicking with the rhythm of a woman determined not to collapse. Each step was agony, but each step was also defiance. The whispers grew louder. "She's pregnant. My God, that's his wife. And that's her best friend? How shameless. Unbelievable." Isabella reached the foot of the stage and raised her voice, trembling but clear. "Not the time, Adrian. You stand here with my best friend, flaunting betrayal while I carry your child, and you dare tell the world this is your new era?" The audience gasped. The tension was unbearable, like a string pulled to the point of snapping. Selena tilted her head, her voice syrupy sweet. "Darling, don't make a scene. It's unbecoming." Her smirk betrayed her words, a look of pure triumph that cut Isabella deeper than any blade. Isabella's chest heaved. She trembled, but she would not bow. "You betrayed not just me," she said, her voice cracking, "but the life we created together. You broke vows, Adrian, vows before God, before these people, before me." The silence was suffocating. No one dared to speak. Even the orchestra had stopped. Reporters froze, pens hovering over paper. The cameras captured every flicker of emotion on Isabella's face, every tear that glistened under the light. Adrian's mask slipped, his arrogance cracking into irritation. "Isabella, enough. This is business. Don't embarrass yourself further." Embarrass herself? The words struck her like a thunderbolt. In that instant, Isabella realized that to Adrian, she was nothing more than a liability, an inconvenience to be erased. Her knees threatened to give way, but she forced herself upright. She looked at him, at the man she had loved, sacrificed for, and trusted, and she saw nothing but a stranger. She looked at Selina, her so-called friend, and saw a viper basking in stolen glory. The humiliation was unbearable, but Isabella stood tall, whispering only loud enough for the front row to hear. "One day, you'll regret this." She turned and walked out, the weight of 1,000 stares pressing on her back. Cameras followed her retreat, capturing the image of a woman broken but unbowed. As the doors closed behind her, the ballroom buzzed with whispers. Adrian tried to continue, tried to restore his image, but the damage was done. No speech could erase the sight of a pregnant wife humiliated under crystal chandeliers. The headlines the next morning were merciless. CEO abandons pregnant wife for best friend at gala. Betrayal in high society, Carter's scandal shocks New York. From vows to lies, Horizon Tech's CEO faces backlash. Photos of Isabella's tear-streaked face splashed across front pages, her pain immortalized for the world to consume. Talk shows debated her dignity, tabloids mocked her, and whispers of pity followed her name. For Isabella, it was the lowest moment of her life. She had lost her marriage, her best friend, and her reputation, all in one night. Alone in her apartment, she cradled her belly and wept, fearing for her child's future. But in the silence of that night, something shifted. She realized Adrian and Selina thought they had destroyed her. They believed she was finished, erased from the story. What they didn't know was that Isabella carried a secret more powerful than their betrayal. The empire they flaunted, the fortune they thought was theirs, did not belong to Adrian Carter. It belonged to her. And one day soon, the world that pitied Isabella would watch her rise, not as a victim, but as the heir who returned to claim everything. The betrayal was public, but the revenge would be even louder. After the glittering lights of the Horizon Tech Gala faded, after the cameras stopped flashing and the whispers settled into printed headlines, Isabella Carter found herself in silence. It was the kind of silence that pressed down like a heavy blanket, suffocating and endless. Her apartment, once a sanctuary she had tried to fill with warmth, felt like a prison of shattered dreams. She sat on the nursery floor, surrounded by tiny clothes still folded in their boxes, the wallpaper of pastel clouds and stars mocking her with promises of a happy family that would never exist. One hand clutched her swollen belly, the other wiping tears that seemed never to stop. Her phone buzzed with messages, journalists asking for statements, distant relatives offering pity, friends whispering condolences that only made her feel more humiliated. The betrayal had been public, merciless, and final. Adrian had not only discarded her, he had erased her with the confidence of a man who believed she was powerless. Selina had not only betrayed her, she had smiled through the act, savoring Isabella's destruction. And now the world looked at her not with respect, but with pity. Pity was worse than hatred. She tried to hold herself together for the baby. At night, she whispered lullabies, her voice trembling through sobs, promising her unborn child that everything would be okay. But inside, she doubted every word. She had no husband, no friend, no protection. Even her identity seemed stripped away. She wasn't Isabella Carter, wife of a CEO. She was the abandoned pregnant woman, a headline, a scandal to gossip about over morning coffee. Her body bore the weight of both pregnancy and despair. Nights were sleepless, filled with twisting thoughts and waves of panic. What would happen when the baby was born? How would she raise a child in a world that had just watched her humiliation? She stared at bills piling on the counter, at legal papers Adrian's lawyers sent demanding a swift divorce. It was cruelty layered upon cruelty. Papers that reduced her years of sacrifice to a list of assets she would be denied. One evening, she forced herself to attend a doctor's appointment. The city streets blurred past her taxi window, neon lights swimming with the tears in her eyes. At the clinic, she sat in the waiting room while couples held hands, husbands whispering reassurances to their wives. Isabella felt like a ghost among them, alone in her grief. When the doctor showed her the baby's heartbeat on the monitor, a faint thumping like a tiny drum, she broke down. Tears streamed freely, her hand reaching for a support that wasn't there. For a moment, she considered giving up, not on the child, never on the child, but on herself. Maybe Adrian had been right. Maybe she wasn't strong enough. The nights grew darker. She stopped answering calls. Food went untouched. The curtains stayed closed. Even Selena's face haunted her, on television, in magazines, smiling proudly beside Adrian. Together they were paraded as the new power couple, while Isabella was painted as the weak, discarded wife. One night, overwhelmed by loneliness, she opened her laptop and typed her name into a search bar. The results stabbed her like knives. Headlines screamed her pain. Abandoned at 6 months pregnant, Isabella Carter left behind. From luxury to loneliness, the fall of Mrs. Carter. She stayed silent while her husband loved another. The comments were worse. Strangers mocked her for being naive, for not fighting harder, for letting herself be humiliated. They didn't see her sacrifice, her loyalty, her love. They saw only weakness. She slammed the laptop shut, curling into herself on the couch. Her chest heaved with sobs until no sound came out, only broken breaths. It was in those nights that she began to lose hope. She stopped speaking to the baby, stopped singing lullabies. She feared her child would be born into sadness, inheriting her despair. She even thought of disappearing entirely, of leaving New York, of vanishing where no one could find her. Maybe obscurity would be kinder than humiliation. But each time she considered escape, a small flutter in her belly reminded her of the life depending on her. That tiny heartbeat became her anchor, the only thing keeping her from sinking completely. Still, she was fragile. When the divorce papers arrived at her door, thick with legal jargon and Adrian's signature stamped like a knife wound, she nearly collapsed. They left her with nothing, no share of the penthouse, no financial security, no recognition of her sacrifices. It was a calculated strike meant to erase her entirely. Isabella lay on the nursery floor that night, clutching the papers in one hand and her belly in the other, sobbing until dawn. The walls of the apartment seemed to close in, suffocating her with reminders of all she had lost. And yet, even in her darkest moment, something inside her refused to die. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a whisper in her blood, a memory of her mother's voice telling her, "You are stronger than you think, Bella. You carry more than his name. You carry a legacy." At the time, Isabella didn't understand what that meant. She only knew that she couldn't let despair consume her completely. For the baby, for the future, she had to survive, even if survival felt impossible. In those days of collapse, she didn't yet see the path forward. She didn't yet know about the documents waiting in a lawyer's vault, the fortune that bore her name, the empire her father had left in her hands. All she knew was pain, silence, and loneliness. But sometimes, before rebirth, there must be ruin. And Isabella Carter was standing at the very bottom of ruin. She had been humiliated, discarded, and stripped of everything. But soon she would discover the truth that would turn despair into destiny. The night the divorce papers arrived, Isabella thought she had reached the end of herself. She lay curled on the nursery floor, the unopened boxes of baby clothes looming around her like ghosts of a future that had been stolen. Her tears had dried into salty streaks on her cheeks when the doorbell rang. It was nearly midnight. No one ever came at that hour. She hesitated, clutching her robe tighter around her growing belly. For a fleeting second she feared it was Adrian, arriving to twist the knife deeper. But when she opened the door, she found a tall man in a charcoal suit, his presence calm but commanding. "Mrs. Carter?" he asked gently. She nodded warily. "My name is William Blackwell," he said, handing her a business card embossed with gold letters. "I was your father's attorney. I think it's time we talked." Isabella's chest tightened. Her father. Richard Carter's name was one she rarely allowed herself to whisper. He had been a titan in business, but to her, he had always been a distant figure, larger than life and rarely present. After her mother's death, Isabella had distanced herself even further from his empire, determined to build a simple life of her own. She had spent years burying that part of her identity, living as if she were just another woman. Now, the ghost of her father had returned in the form of this solemn lawyer. William stepped inside, setting a leather briefcase on the dining table. "I'm here because of your father's will. It was never publicized for reasons of privacy, but the conditions have now been met, and you, Isabella, are no longer just his daughter. You are his heir." The word heir echoed in her ears like thunder. "I think there's been a mistake," she whispered, shaking her head. "I don't want any of that. I don't belong in his world." William's gaze softened. "Whether you want it or not, it belongs to you." Your father left you controlling shares in Carter Global Holdings. As of your marriage, and especially now that you are with child, those shares are yours by law. You control an empire valued at $5 billion. The room spun. Isabella clutched the back of a chair for balance. Her knees threatened to buckle. $5 billion. She had spent weeks believing she was powerless, that Adrian had stripped her of everything. And yet here was a man telling her she held more power than Adrian could ever dream of. "Why now?" she asked, her voice trembling. William opened the briefcase, pulling out a stack of documents bound in leather. "Your father's will was very specific. He wanted you to live freely, without the shadow of wealth shaping your choices. He stipulated that his estate would pass to you only after you married and began a family. He believed that by then, you would understand responsibility. That day has come, Isabella. You may feel broken, but in the eyes of the law and the market, you are one of the most powerful women in this city." Isabella sank into a chair, her hands trembling as she touched the documents. Her name appeared again and again, tied to companies, properties, accounts. She wasn't just an heiress, she was the owner. The realization struck like lightning. And then, just as quickly, came the fear. "What if Adrian finds out?" she whispered. "He'll try to take it from me. He can't," William interrupted firmly. "Your father ensured that. These assets are in your name alone. Adrian has no legal claim, and if he tries, we are prepared to fight. He may have humiliated you, Isabella, but he cannot destroy you. In fact, you now hold the power to destroy him." Her heart pounded. For weeks, she had been the woman everyone pitied, the woman discarded. But in that moment, she saw a new reflection of herself, one her enemies had never imagined. Still, disbelief lingered. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted. "I'm just me. I'm not strong enough." William's expression softened. "Strength isn't about never breaking. It's about what you do once you've been broken. Your father believed in you, and I think deep down you know you were never ordinary. You've carried others all your life. Now it's time to carry yourself." Isabella looked around the apartment, at the nursery filled with unopened dreams. For the first time, she felt a flicker of something beyond despair. It was small, fragile, but it was hope. Over the next days, William guided her through the transition. He showed her accounts that dwarfed Adrian's empire, properties across continents, board seats at companies she had never even heard of. Slowly, Isabella began to grasp the truth. Adrian had abandoned a woman he believed was powerless, but he had unknowingly discarded the rightful owner of more wealth and influence than he could ever amass. The irony was sharp, almost cruel. Adrian had chosen Selena for her beauty, her glamour, her ability to shine under chandeliers. But Isabella, the woman he mocked and humiliated, was the one holding the keys to real power. The tabloids continued to drag her name. The whispers of pity still followed her, but Isabella no longer crumbled under them. She began to stand taller, her hands steady as she signed papers transferring control. Each signature was a step toward a new identity, a rebirth from victim to victor. One night she stood before the mirror, her belly round with the life inside her, the documents of empire stacked neatly on her desk. For the first time since the gala, she smiled, not with joy, not yet, but with determination. "Adrian thinks I'm finished," she whispered to her reflection. "Selena thinks she's won, but they have no idea who I really am." Her hand pressed against her belly, feeling the flutter of her child. "We're not weak. We're not broken. We're going to rise." The twist of fate was almost poetic. The woman who had been humiliated in front of the world was not a powerless figure after all. She was the heir to a legacy greater than Adrian's ambition, greater than Selena's vanity. And soon, the world would see her not as the abandoned wife, but as the woman who returned to claim everything. The storm of betrayal had nearly drowned her. But in its wake, Isabella had discovered the tide that would carry her to power. For weeks after William Blackwell revealed the truth of her inheritance, Isabella felt as though she were living in two worlds. In one, she was the woman New York still pitied, the abandoned wife, the scandal, the subject of cruel headlines. In the other, she was the heiress to an empire worth billions, signing documents that shifted entire markets with the stroke of her pen. Between those two realities stood the version of herself she had not yet become, the woman who would transform pain into power. The first step was reclaiming her reflection. For too long, Isabella had stared at mirrors and seen only loss. Her eyes were swollen from tears, her body heavy not just with pregnancy but with grief. Adrian's voice echoed in her head, belittling her, telling her she was weak, ordinary, invisible. Selena's smirk haunted her, a reminder of betrayal. But William's words lingered too. Strength isn't about never breaking, it's about what you do once you've been broken. So one morning, Isabella stood in front of the mirror and made a decision. She called Elena Vance, a stylist she had once met at a charity event. Elena was known for transformations, not just of wardrobes, but of spirits. When she arrived at Isabella's apartment, she found a woman fragile but ready. "I don't want to look like Adrian's wife anymore," Isabella said quietly. "I want to look like someone who owns her future." Elena smiled knowingly. "Then let's build you armor." The transformation began slowly. Gowns were traded for tailored suits that spoke of authority. Soft pastels were replaced with bold colors, deep navy, crimson, emerald, that commanded attention. Her hair, once worn loose in gentle waves, was styled sleek, sharp, a crown of confidence. Jewelry became minimal but deliberate, each piece chosen not for sparkle but for strength. When Isabella looked in the mirror again, she barely recognized herself. The woman staring back wasn't a victim. She was someone who could walk into a boardroom and silence it with a single glance. But the change wasn't just physical. Isabella began to rebuild her mind. She devoured books on leadership, finance, and strategy. William arranged private sessions with trusted advisors who taught her the mechanics of her inheritance. At first, the information overwhelmed her. Shareholder rights, corporate structures, international holdings. But day by day, she absorbed it. She had always been intelligent, always had the discipline to learn. Adrian had dismissed her as ordinary, but the truth was she had dimmed her own brilliance for him. Now, it began to shine again. At night, when the baby kicked, she whispered not of despair but of destiny. "We're going to be okay," she told her unborn child. "We're going to be more than okay. We're going to rise." Her strength grew visible. She walked with steadier steps, her shoulders straight, her gaze unwavering. Even strangers noticed the shift. At the cafe down the street, the barista who once looked at her with pity now looked with curiosity, sensing something different. The media, however, still painted her as fragile. Headlines speculated about her future, assuming she would retreat quietly from the spotlight. Adrian and Selena paraded themselves across magazines, flaunting their love as though Isabella had been erased. They laughed at galas, whispered about her downfall, and boasted that Horizon Tech would dominate under their reign. But Isabella no longer flinched at their images. She knew something they didn't, that the empire they flaunted was built on sand, and she held the tide. Her first true test came when William brought her to a meeting of Carter Global Holdings board. It was a room filled with seasoned executives, men and women who had once bowed to her father's authority. They didn't expect much from her. To them, she was a broken woman in the tabloids, a pregnant wife discarded by a CEO. But when Isabella entered the boardroom, dressed in a fitted navy suit, her hair gleaming, her eyes steady, silence fell. She laid out documents with confidence, her voice clear as she addressed them. "I know what the world thinks of me," she began, "but I am not defined by headlines. I am Richard Carter's daughter, and I carry his legacy. This company does not belong to outsiders. It belongs to us, and I intend to protect it." The room shifted. Doubt gave way to surprise, surprise to respect. By the time she finished, several board members exchanged glances of approval. Isabella had not just survived the meeting, she had commanded it. That night, as she walked out of the building, a light rain fell across the city. She tilted her face upward, letting the drops wash away the last remnants of weakness. It felt like baptism, a rebirth under the neon glow of Manhattan. The transformation was complete, not because she had shed her past, but because she had embraced it. Every scar, every betrayal, every tear had forged her into someone stronger. Adrian and Selena still believed they had destroyed her. They laughed in penthouses, whispered in bed, convinced Isabella was fading into irrelevance. But what they didn't see was the storm gathering on the horizon, the storm Isabella herself had become. She was no longer the woman they had pitied. She was the heir, the leader, the mother-to-be who would raise her child in power, not in shame. And soon, she would step into the world not as a scandal, but as a force. The transformation was not just about appearance. It was about reclaiming her identity, her dignity, her destiny. And when she finally returned to the public eye, the world would not see the woman Adrian had humiliated. They would see the woman he had underestimated, and the woman who would end his reign. The invitation arrived in a cream-colored envelope, sealed with the gold crest of Horizon Tech. It was the annual gala, the very same event where Isabella had been destroyed months earlier. For most, the sight of that seal would have reopened wounds too deep to bear. But for Isabella Carter, it was not a reminder of defeat. It was an opportunity. She stood by the window of her office, the city lights glittering below, the envelope resting in her hand. The baby inside her kicked gently, as if sensing her thoughts. Isabella smiled faintly. "We're going back," she whispered. "But this time, we won't be the victims." In the weeks leading up to the gala, Isabella prepared meticulously. With William Blackwell's guidance, she secured her position as the controlling shareholder of Carter Global Holdings. Quietly but decisively, she moved her pieces into place. Lawyers drafted statements, allies were briefed, and evidence of Adrian's misconduct was compiled. Every step was calculated, every move deliberate. On the night of the gala, Isabella emerged from a black car that glided to a stop outside the Grand Hotel. Photographers turned instantly, their lenses snapping furiously. The woman they once pitied had returned, not in shame but in triumph. Her gown was a masterpiece, black velvet with a golden sash, sleek and regal, designed to accentuate her strength. Her hair was pulled back in a crown-like twist, her jewelry understated but powerful. She walked with poise, her heels clicking like thunder across the marble floor. Gasps followed her as she entered the ballroom. Conversations stilled. Reporters scrambled to adjust their cameras. "She's here. Isabella Carter, look at her. She's glowing. She doesn't look broken at all." Adrian noticed her immediately. Standing at the center of the room with Selena clinging to his arm, he froze for a fraction of a second before plastering on a smirk. He whispered something into Selena's ear, and she laughed too loudly, as though mocking Isabella would erase the sudden unease rippling through the room. The orchestra played softly, chandeliers blazing overhead, as Isabella made her way to the front. Every step was a declaration. Every glance from the crowd fueled her resolve. When Adrian took the stage to deliver his speech, the room erupted in polite applause. He basked in it, confident as ever, his voice booming with arrogance. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the future of Horizon Tech. With my leadership and the support of those closest to me, we are entering a new golden age." His hand rested proudly on Selena's waist. Cameras flashed, capturing their perfect performance. But then, Isabella's voice rang out from the back of the room. "Is that so, Adrian? Because according to the documents I have here, you won't be leading anything." A ripple of shock tore through the ballroom. Heads turned, murmurs erupted. Adrian's face drained of color as Isabella stepped forward, holding a sleek leather folder. She mounted the steps with the poise of a queen reclaiming her throne. Standing beside him under the chandeliers, she turned to the audience, her voice steady and clear. "My name is Isabella Carter," she began. "Many of you know me as the wife Adrian discarded, the woman humiliated at this very gala. But what you don't know is that I am also the daughter of Richard Carter, and as of this year, I am the rightful heir to Carter Global Holdings." Gasps filled the room. Cameras flashed wildly. Investors leaned forward, whispering frantically to each other. Isabella opened the folder, revealing signed documents and stamped seals. "These papers confirm my controlling ownership of the Carter Empire, valued at over $5 billion. Adrian Carter has no claim, no power, and no future here." The room exploded with chatter. Selena's smile faltered, her hand slipping from Adrian's arm. Adrian's jaw tightened, his mask of confidence shattering. "This is ridiculous," Adrian snapped, grabbing for the microphone. "She's lying. She's desperate." But Isabella cut him off, her voice sharp as steel. "Am I? Or should I show them the evidence of your embezzlement? The offshore accounts, the misused funds, the lies you fed your own board?" A collective gasp swept through the audience. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras capturing Adrian's panic. "You thought you destroyed me, Adrian," Isabella continued, her voice rising. "You thought I was weak, invisible. But while you flaunted your betrayal, I became stronger. And tonight, in front of the same world that watched you humiliate me, I am reclaiming my place." Selina's face turned pale, her body stiff with dread. She whispered, "Adrian, is this true?" He shoved her hand away, his mask crumbling completely. "Stay out of this," he hissed. But it was too late. The audience had already chosen sides. The applause that erupted wasn't for Adrian. It was for Isabella. She stepped closer to him, her voice low but fierce. "You broke your vows, you betrayed me, our child, and our future. And now, you've lost everything. This empire was never yours. It was mine all along." The applause grew louder, thundering through the ballroom. Investors surged toward Isabella, eager to shake her hand, to align themselves with the true power in the room. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashing in a frenzy. Adrian stood frozen, his empire collapsing in real time. Selina, sensing the ruin, slipped quietly away, her dream of being a queen vanishing like smoke. Isabella raised her chin, her hand resting proudly on her belly. "I may have been humiliated once," she declared, her voice carrying through the hall, "but never again. Tonight, the world sees the truth. Women are not weak, and betrayal has consequences." The crowd erupted into cheers. The orchestra struck up a triumphant melody, as though the universe itself celebrated her victory. Isabella smiled, tears glistening in her eyes, not of sorrow, but of vindication. The woman who had walked into this ballroom months ago, broken and pitied, had returned transformed, powerful, unstoppable. Adrian Carter's reign ended that night, not with applause, but with the roar of a woman he had underestimated. The echoes of applause still rang in Isabella's ears, long after the Horizon Tech Gala had ended. The very stage where she had once been humiliated had become the place of her greatest triumph. Cameras captured every second, newspapers rushed to rewrite their headlines, and by morning, the world would no longer see her as the abandoned wife. They would see her as the woman who had risen from betrayal to become the heir of a $5 billion empire. Adrian Carter never recovered from that night. Within days, Horizon Tech's board voted him out, citing misconduct and betrayal of trust. His offshore accounts, exposed by Isabella's evidence, led to investigations that stripped him of the fortune he had tried to build. Investors pulled their support, the stock plummeted, and Adrian's name, once synonymous with innovation, became a symbol of arrogance and downfall. Selina Moore fared no better. The magazines that once celebrated her beauty now tore her apart with vicious headlines. "The mistress who lost everything," one read. Endorsement deals vanished, designers withdrew invitations, and the same cameras that had once adored her now captured her, leaving restaurants alone, her face hidden behind sunglasses. The glamorous life she had stolen crumbled, and with it, her illusion of victory. Isabella, meanwhile, stepped into her new life with grace and determination. The offices of Carter Global Holdings became her new battlefield, but she no longer entered rooms as a silent accessory. She walked in with authority, her presence commanding respect. Executives who once doubted her now leaned forward to hear her vision. She wasn't just protecting her father's legacy, she was reshaping it, guiding the empire into a future built on integrity, not betrayal. But beyond the boardrooms and headlines, Isabella's greatest triumph was personal. Months later, in the quiet of a private hospital room, she gave birth to her child. The moment she heard the first cry, tears streamed down her face, not of sorrow, but of overwhelming love and relief. She held her baby close, whispering, "We did it. We survived, and this world is ours now." The child was her anchor, her reason, her victory embodied in tiny hands and soft breaths. In that moment, Isabella knew she had not just reclaimed her dignity, she had secured a future worth living. Life did not become easy overnight. There were sleepless nights, boardroom battles, and endless responsibilities. But Isabella faced them with a strength forged in fire. She learned to balance motherhood with leadership, refusing to apologize for either role. When critics tried to dismiss her as too emotional or too inexperienced, she silenced them with results. Under her guidance, Carter Global Holdings flourished, expanding into new markets, launching initiatives that prioritized people over greed. Every decision she made carried a quiet defiance, a reminder to the world that women could lead with both strength and compassion. Adrian, now stripped of wealth and status, tried once to contact her. He sent a letter full of empty apologies and pleas for forgiveness. Isabella read it in silence. then placed it in a drawer. Forgiveness, she realized, was not about absolving him. It was about freeing herself. She no longer carried his betrayal like a chain. She had moved beyond it, stronger and freer than he could ever imagine. As for Selina, their paths never crossed again. Isabella sometimes saw her name in tabloids, attached to stories of failed ventures and scandals, but she felt no bitterness anymore. Selina had written her own downfall with greed. Isabella had no need for revenge. Life had taken care of that. What remained was Isabella's story, one she now told not with shame but with pride. She began speaking at conferences, sharing her journey with other women who had been silenced, betrayed, or underestimated. Her words carried weight, not because they were polished, but because they were real. "I was humiliated in front of the world," she told one audience of young women. "I was told I was nothing. But pain doesn't define us. Betrayal doesn't end us. What matters is what we do with the pieces. We can rebuild. We can rise, and when we rise stronger." The applause that followed was different from the polite claps of gala guests. It was raw, heartfelt, a chorus of women who saw themselves in her story. Years later, when her child was old enough to ask about the past, Isabella told the truth, not to burden, but to teach. "Your father made choices that hurt us," she said gently. "But those choices pushed me to become who I was meant to be. And because of that, you will grow up knowing that strength can come from the darkest places." The child looked at her with wide, trusting eyes, and Isabella felt peace. She had not only survived betrayal, she had transformed it into a legacy of resilience. Her empire was not just built on wealth, but on the unshakable truth that no one could erase her worth. The final irony was poetic. Adrian had left her because he thought she was weak, powerless, ordinary. Selina had betrayed her because she thought Isabella's life was an easy crown to steal. Both had been wrong. The crown had always been hers, forged in fire, carried with dignity. On the anniversary of her father's death, Isabella stood in the boardroom that bore his name. She placed a framed photo of her mother beside the long table, whispering, "I kept the promise, Mama. I didn't let them destroy me." And as she looked out over the skyline, her child asleep in the nursery nearby, she knew the story was no longer about betrayal. It was about rebirth. Isabella Carter's name would forever be remembered, not as the woman who was abandoned, but as the woman who proved that when life breaks you, you can rebuild into something unshakable. Her message echoed through every boardroom, every gala, every headline. Women are not weak. Women are not disposable. And betrayal is never the end. It is only the beginning of a greater rise. So, that's how the story ends. And if you're still here with me right now, my friend, it means something in this journey has touched your heart in a way that words can't fully describe. Maybe it reminded you of a moment when life broke you down, or maybe it gave you strength to believe that no betrayal, no humiliation can truly define who you are. You see, life often feels unfair. People we trust betray us. Dreams collapse, and we're left wondering if we have the strength to go on. But as the Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, we cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them. Isabella's story is proof of that. She was broken, humiliated, left with nothing, but instead of staying down, she rose stronger than ever. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Isabella's pain became her path. And so can yours. Whatever you're facing right now, loss, betrayal, loneliness, it doesn't have to be the end. It can be the beginning of a transformation you never thought possible. So maybe this story isn't just about Isabella. Maybe it's about you, about all of us, about remembering that no one can take away our worth unless we let them, and about realizing that sometimes what feels like the end is only the setup for your most powerful comeback. If this story spoke to you, if it made you feel something deep, then don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who needs hope tonight, and subscribe to our channel so you'll never miss the stories that remind us of our strength, our resilience, and our unbreakable spirit. Because in the end, my friend, betrayal doesn't define us. How we rise does.